In 1956, there were 12,000 drive-ins in America. 95% of those are dead. And yet there are native Indians, the Crankaway Indians of Texas, who believe there is a spirit that lives on in these decayed temples where Americans once worshiped. They call it Wiskabanaha, or the spirit of blood, breasts, and beasts, or the 3 Bs. What you are about to witness is a summoning of that spirit, a return to a part of the American heritage that has all but vanished. It's a heritage of drive-in movies, controversial movies, groundbreaking movies, the weird, the offbeat, the strange, and most of all, the sleazy. You are about to experience one of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world.
I don't know about you, whenever I see a sight like this along the American highway, I get kind of steamed. There's not even any place where you can watch the classic movies anymore. Movies like Please Don't Eat My Mother and Gas Pump Girls and Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. They made Blood-Sucking Freaks today. Who knows if anybody'd even get a chance to see it? Not to mention the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At least Saw is still the king after all these years. But I'm determined to do more than that. This series will bring you 1,000 of the sleaziest drive-in movies ever released. And this project at our current rate of release will be completed in the year 2116. Because that's how dedicated we are to the preservation of the drive-in movie. Kind of makes you sick, don't it? Welcome again to my house, the place where it's all happening. Welcome to another one of our sleaziest movies in the history of the world, which, if you hadn't noticed by now, are full of sex and violence. Now, people get mad at me about this. My own family talks to me about this. They say, Joe Bob, why are you always talking about sex and violence all the time? Sex and violence, sex and violence. But of course, if they like the movies, they say those movies are full of romance and adventure, right? Same thing, but not as much fun. So tonight's movie is about sex. Sex and the College Girl came out in 1964, and of course the title is a ripoff of a much more famous movie called Sex and the Single Girl, which also came out in 1964, starring Natalie Wood, Tony Curtis, Henry Fonda, and Lauren Bacall. Now, Sex and the College Girl stars John Gabriel, Luana Anders, Charles Grodin, and Julie Summers. So as you can see, it's easy to confuse them. You know, Lauren Bacall, Julie Summers. And most people would remember Sex and the Single Girl as a book that was written by Helen Gurley Brown that came out a couple years before that, when people first started talking in public about how horny they were. And really, that's the main difference between sex movies in the 80s and 90s and sex movies in the 60s. Because in the 80s and 90s, the movies are full of people having sex, but in the 60s, the movies are full of people talking about having sex. And one of the interesting things to me is the ones where they talk about it a lot are a lot of times a lot better movies than the ones where they have it. And this is one of the best ones that they ever made. Remember Where the Boys Are, that movie that came out in 1960 with Dolores Hart and Connie Francis and George Hamilton and Yvette Mimieux and Jim Hutton, where a bunch of college girls go to Fort Lauderdale on spring break to get, well, actually they don't go to get sex, they don't go to get laid, they go to get married. And then the girls have all these different relationships, and some of them fall in love, and Yvette Mimieux has cheap, disgusting sex and almost kills herself, and Frank Gorshin is a beatnik jazz singer. That's weird. And they groove to Frank Gorshin's music, and then they all go back home, and they're a lot wiser about their lives. Now, that's your basic beach movie, which they have continued to make for 30 years after that. They still make them today. The stupidest white bread versions of it were the beach party movies. I hate those things, starring Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. But the sleaziest version of the beach movie is Sex and the College Girl, the one we're paying tribute to. Now, two things make it different. One, The hero of this thing is a sleazeball playboy, played by John Gabriel. They were trying to make a singing star out of John. They thought he was the next Bobby Darin, and this was his big chance. But it turned out he wasn't even the last Bobby Darin. So John does 2 jazz songs in the flick, complete with jazz flute solos. You know, no 60s movies complete without at least 1 jazz flute solo. And he sings these songs, Gotta Love Cool and Fun Lovers, with his jazz combo. That's kind of weird. And he has this dingy Miss Priss girlfriend, played by Luanna Anders, and he has a weirdo friend played by Charles Grodin, and that's probably the best performance in the flick. Charles Grodin demonstrating the Afro jazz dance style. That's neat. There's plenty of bongo drums in this thing. Water skiing sequences. My favorite scene in all movies about the swinging 60s lifestyle is always the wild party. You remember those? This actress named Valora Nolan steals this movie by doing the wild dance at the wild party. There's always some girl who gets totally drunk, goes totally crazy, and starts doing a free-form interpretive jazz dance in her stocking feet at the wild party. And in this movie, it's Valora, who you'll see in the very first scene sleeping on the beach. So watch for her. Now, just a couple more things. One is all the girls in this movie dress like Jackie Kennedy. I want to show you what I mean. Do y'all remember what this is? You know what this is? That's right, a pillbox hat popularized by Jackie Kennedy, the fashion queen of the world, while she was married to the president. That's why you wear them like that. Well, you wear it up here if you're Jackie Kennedy, wear them back here if you're a rabbi. Same thing, Jackie Kennedy rabbi, Jackie Kennedy rabbi. But you'll notice that all the girls, they not only wear these things, but they wear their hair like Jackie Kennedy, they wear dresses like Jackie Kennedy, they have those strange Jackie Kennedy high heels, you remember those things? Except for the nice girl in the movie, the one we're supposed to like, Luanna Anders. She has her hair in one of those double reverse flip things, and, you know, looks like one of the Muppets or something. But the ultimate banker's daughter virgin dingbat that nobody wants to go out with. So these women are all dressed up like the president's wife, but they're giving sex away left and right. So, I mean, do you see how confused the 60s were? And then the other thing I want you to know about this movie is that it didn't make a bit of money. It's a lot better movie than Sex and the Single Girl, the one with Tony Curtis and Natalie Wood. But the other one made money, this one made no money. You know why? Because this one shows spring break the way it really is. You go to some resort somewhere where you don't know anybody, you're looking for romance, you fall in love, you have sex, and what happens? It's icky. You don't like it. You start thinking, uh-oh, that was a big mistake, wasn't it? Boy, am I sorry I did that. Now I've got to deal with this person. And when people get drunk in this movie, they really get drunk. They really get obnoxious. So this movie is like too real. I mean, the public didn't take to it. It's gritty. And in fact, the cast was mostly these New York method actors, and even they were embarrassed that they were in this movie. Charles Grodin wrote a book describing his entire acting career, and he didn't even mention this movie. But it's a great flick, directed by Joseph Adler, and we hope that someday it will get the credit that it deserves. And one more thing before we show it. It was filmed entirely in Puerto Rico, and you may not know this judging by Puerto Rico today, but in the 60s, Puerto Rico was a very popular luxury resort. It was like Las Vegas, had dozens of huge hotels. The biggest stars in show business went there to do their acts. So these people are at the center of where all the wild parties are happening. John Gabriel, he should have at least got a recording contract out of this deal. So you tell me, what happened with this movie? Was it just too sleazy for America in 1964? Here we go. Charles Grodin is going to hate us for showing this. Here we go. You know, that airport scene is a killer. It kind of gives you the creeps, doesn't it? See, that's why the movie didn't become as popular as the other swinging 60s movies. You're supposed to be in love or something at the end of the movie, but see, these guys in this movie are the ultimate I'll call you later bozos, and there is nothing that makes a girl madder than when you do not call her back. So that's what got Gary Hart in trouble. People didn't care so much that he had an affair with that gal, cheated on his wife, but he didn't call that girl back. And also, the other reason that this movie don't make it is that it came out just a little bit too late. See, by the time it came out, President Kennedy was dead. Groovy singers like John Gabriel couldn't get record contracts anymore because of the Beatles showing up. And so, before you knew it, the beach movie was just gone. It didn't come back till the late 70s, early 80s, long in there. And girls like Vicky, the wild dancer at the party, the one played by Valora Nolan, you know what happened to them. They became go-go dancers. It was time to get psychedelic. It was time for movies like Herschel Gordon Lewis's Hot Night at the Go-Go Lounge, where two go-go girls get naked and do the pony for 20 solid minutes at a time. But when that movie came out, the sleaziest movies in the history of the world were about to get a lot sleazier. But that's another story. I'm Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the college girl has taken her two-piece bikini and jumped on the last plane back to the States. The falcon has molted, the fat man bowls alone. But the drive-in will never... But the drive-in will never die.